All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. We'll give it a minute to let everybody get on here, and we'll go ahead and start. Thanks again for joining. Start here in a few more moments. Feel free to say hello in the chat. I see a few of you in there. All right, we'll go ahead and start. It is recording. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. For those that have been with us along the way, welcome back. For those that have been joining for the first time in this multi-event series, welcome. This will be the fourth session in the ITOM Talks Knowledge Worth Spreading series. Today's ITOM topic focuses on a better together story between ITOM and security operations, or SecOps, as you'll hear us refer to it as. A few housekeeping items before we get going here. Everyone will be muted upon entry. The reason I mention this is that we still encourage you to ask questions and interact with our speakers throughout the presentation. To do so, you'll find the Q&A tab on your Zoom dashboard bar. Please use this tab to submit any questions that you might have during the presentation. That way we can get those answered. Also, feel free to utilize the chat, pop in and say hello. See a few of you have done that already. And with that, I will pass it along to our first presenter today, Emily Walker. Take it away, Emily.
Thanks, Cooper. Hi, everyone. Thank you again for joining our ITOM Talks Fall webinar series. My name is Emily Walker, and I'm a solutions consultant for our ITOM platform here at ServiceNow. Joining me on today's call is Lauren Miller, who is also a solutions consultant for ITOM, and Mohammed Nazer, who's a solutions consultant for our SecOps side. We'll do a quick round of introductions and give you a little background information on ourselves. So before joining ServiceNow as a solutions consultant, I spent 12 years on the IT side of the house. I first got my start serving in the United States Navy, and then continued down my career path in the commercial spaces of healthcare and technology startups, where I led help desk teams and departments before making my transition into solutions consulting. Lauren, do you want to say a few words about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Emily. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Lauren Miller. Similar to Emily, I'm also a solution consultant specializing in ITOM here at ServiceNow. Came to ServiceNow from Microsoft. There I was focusing on cloud operations and governance, and here at ServiceNow, I'm certified in CMDB and discovery, so kind of on that same path, and really excited to be talking kind of along those lines as we talk about visibility in today's Better Together webinar. So thanks for joining us, and I'll pass it to you, Nazer.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mohammed Nazer, and I am a solution consultant also who is specializing in security operations. Before joining ServiceNow, I was actually working as a cybersecurity engineer. I was a consultant for the military, and I also worked in product manufacturing and improvement. And it's a pleasure to be speaking with everyone today.
Thanks, Nazer. Thanks, Nazer. Thanks, Lauren. So like Cooper mentioned, today we're talking about IT operations management, ITOM, and security operations, SecOps, and the great value that they bring together. So again, this is part 4 of our ITOM Talk series. And if you had the opportunity to attend any of our previous sessions, we thank you, and we hope that you've enjoyed them and found them useful. And if you haven't been able to attend, we have the last 2 sessions happening on October 13th and October 20th, where we will be covering ITOM DevOps and ITOM Advanced Discovery. And because of how popular these have been, we've also added an additional session for October 27th. This is another Better Together story for ITOM and CSM, Customer Service Management, where we will be focusing on the proactive customer service and solutions. We'll post the registration link in the chat if you'd like to sign up for any of the remaining sessions. So before we jump into the agenda, I really want to entrust the importance of why we created this session. Our world of work continues to change at an ever-increasing pace. This includes more threats and new security challenges. When our IT operations and security teams work in silos, this creates inefficiencies and provides greater room for risks. In fact, 76% of organizations lack a common view of assets and applications across security and IT, making it that much harder to quickly remediate security issues. And 56% of organizations use email and spreadsheets to manage security incidents, responses resulting in unaddressed and often critical incidents and vulnerabilities. Threats do not care about business silos and sometimes the lack of automation that we have in our organizations. So today we're going to walk through how ITOM and SecOps can help us to maintain resiliency and service performance for both an operational and security perspective. For the agenda, I will be giving an overview of ITOM and SecOps, and then Lauren and Nazer will be giving us a demo on each of these. We'll then discuss a few better together use cases, and we'll leave some time at the end for Q&A. But if you have any questions either during the slides or demo, please feel free to drop them in the chat or in the Q&A panel, and we'll do our best to answer them. Here's our safe harbor notice. Please remember this presentation may contain forward-looking statements that reflect the current beliefs of ServiceNow and are based on current information available. These forward-looking statements should not be relied upon in making purchasing decisions. With that, though, we won't be going too much into future enhancements or a roadmap for future releases. We'll be sticking with what is currently released. And speaking of which, please make sure to check out the new features that were just released back in September for a ROM release. You can find these release notes and product documentation on our website at docs.servicenow.com. I'm sure many of you have seen this slide before. This slide is really an iconic representation of our Now platform that explains our unique service offerings. So at the core of our Now platform, we offer one data model and one architecture, along with built-in unique offerings such as a single centralized CMDB. CMDB meaning configuration management database, which is that central place for you to keep track of your infrastructure, and as we call them, CIs, configuration items. Within the platform, we also include workflows and seamless integrations to and from your other systems of record. So this is not just your IT tools, but also applications that you have throughout your entire organization. We also include machine learning, AI, and predictive analytics, and robust security and compliance features, along with the ability to administer and configure your own unique instance. The Now platform also offers 4 workflows, which are pre-built solutions for IT, employee, customer, and creator. And on top of this, all of this data can be delivered through mobile, web, or collaboration and productivity tools such as Slack or Microsoft Teams. The Now platform helps you to deliver great experiences to your employees, customers, and partners through the interfaces that they love. ServiceNow strives to connect departments and organizations by creating a seamless system of action. That's why we call the Now platform the platform of platforms for all your business solutions and all workflows. On this slide, we're diving deeper into those 4 pre-built workflows: IT, employee, customer, and creator. And we're looking at the capabilities within each. Excuse me. Today, we will focus on 2 of these IT workflows, ITOM and SecOps, and how we tell their story of being better together. So first, let's talk about ITOM. ITOM enables organizations to gain visibility across their infrastructure and applications, maintain service health, and optimize cloud delivery and governance. We break ITOM into these 3 parts: visibility, health, and optimization. Visibility consists of discovery and service mapping. Together, discovery and service mapping give you an integrated real-time visibility across all your on-prem, cloud, and serverless infrastructure. And not just infrastructure visibility, but an accurate view of how these services flow together across your hybrid IT environment. When we pair ITOM visibility with SecOps, we're able to see what application services have vulnerabilities and security incidents. And we can then use this information to prioritize and resolve threats based upon the impact they pose to your organization. We'll talk more about how ITOM visibility works in the next couple of slides, and Lauren and Nazer will show us more of this in the demo portion. So additionally with ITOM, we also have ITOM Health, which includes event management and health log analytics. ITOM Health helps you track and maintain the health of end-to-end services in your organization. Using AI ops and machine learning, event management helps to reduce event noise and alleviate chasing false positives within your network. Teams are able to quickly pinpoint the root cause of service issues, so you don't have to sift through enormous amounts of disconnected event data to know what's wrong. And anomaly detection to prevent when issues might occur before end users are impacted, with faster root cause identification and resolution. And finally, we have IT optimization, which contains cloud provisioning and governance. With CPG, you can provision private and public cloud infrastructure and services. You're able to achieve consistent management and cost visibility. ITOM optimization features provide an integrated service-centric approach that maximizes business service quality, drives efficient processes, and ensures robust governance and compliance. So for now, we're going to keep diving deeper into ITOM visibility and more specifically into discovery to understand how these applications and devices are found on your network. We're starting here because ITOM visibility is really the starting point for teams to see what they have in their network and how we can tie security operations back to those applications and devices. So how does this all work? Well, Discovery is able to find computers, servers, printers, and a variety of other IP-enabled devices and the applications that run on them via our MID server. The MID server is a lightweight Java application that runs on your Windows or Linux server. Typically, this is a virtual machine. The MID server queries your ServiceNow instance for probes to run, and then executes the instructions in those probes or patterns that it specifies. The MID server then returns the results to the ServiceNow instance where the sensors process it. And once it gathers all of this data, it then names these applications and devices as unique CIs, configuration items. And then finally stores them in your CMDB, your configuration management database. The MID server passes all of this information and communications on port 443, an outbound only port, which helps to ensure that our communications from the MID server to the ServiceNow instance are secure. And all communications are initiated inside the enterprise's firewall. Now that we've talked a little bit about how Discovery can help capture CIs and store them in your CMDB, we'll talk briefly about the differences between Discovery and service mapping and the value that they can bring to the security operations. Typically, we see Discovery and service mapping paired together to provide that full 360-degree view of how CIs are connected together within your organization. So with Discovery, we're finding those applications and devices on our network, we're naming them as unique CIs, and then we're updating our CMDB, that centralized place for all the information that Discovery finds. Excuse me. It makes the relationship of what runs on what. We call this horizontal discovery. And in this slide, we see this on the middle and left graphics for both infrastructure and application CIs. On the right graphic, we see service mapping. This is called top-down discovery. Service mapping finds all application services in our organization and then builds a comprehensive map of these CIs Discovery has found. Service mapping connects these devices to business services, such as an email service. So in the context of pairing ITOM visibility with SecOps, we're able to see that full view of what a threat could potentially pose to our organization. We gain visibility into critical incidents to identify high impact threats in real time and at scale. This also gives us the ability to quickly prioritize security incidents with business context. And once you have all of this data coming in from ITOM visibility, that's really where we are able to see the value of having a multi-source service-aware CMDB. Having a fully built out CMDB gives you the ability to monitor the infrastructure, helping ensure integrity, stability, security, and continuous service. You can also see here in this slide that you can build out your CMDB with other services, such as certificate inventory, firewall auditing and reporting, and tag governance auditing, along with other CMDBs or third-party tools you have in your environment. So when it comes to security, you really want to make sure that you can see everything in your network and have relevant context. That's why it's so important to have a full mapping of relevant assets along with their services and criticality. Having a fully built out CMDB can accurately pinpoint issues. It's your core. The stronger it is, the better your entire operations, your IT operations foundation is, which in turn magnifies your ability to quickly resolve these security incidents that are coming into your network. Let's switch gears and talk about security operations for a minute. Security operations brings incident data from your security tools into a structured response engine that uses intelligent workflows, automation, and a deep connection with IT operations to prioritize and resolve threats based on the impact that they pose to your organization. Many organizations struggled with identifying security threats and vulnerabilities, prioritizing them, and then coordinating with IT to remediate them. I know this for a fact. Security threats were always one of my biggest concerns when I worked in IT, and that's because they can literally paralyze a company in a matter of minutes. I worked for a few companies that had really yet to embrace their digital transformation. And because of this, it really limited our visibility into the entire infrastructure. Systems were siloed and processes were manual. We didn't have that full end-to-end view. And what we were monitoring was still only half as good as what the power of ITOM and SecOps on the Now platform can do. Early in my career, I worked for a company that actually went through a ransomware attack. Luckily, it was an old marketing drive with data that was no longer needed. But the fact is that someone was still able to break into our firewall, access our systems, and steal our data. We were incredibly lucky in this situation. It could have been much worse. I read a study recently that said 62% of organizations that have been breached weren't even aware that they were vulnerable to this data breach. I can definitely attest to this. You can only monitor what you see in your infrastructure. Using ITOM and SecOps, security analysts and vulnerability managers can seamlessly automate their security tools and communication by working in a unified platform. So let's talk about the various parts of security operations. SecOps consists of vulnerability response, security incident response, configuration compliance, and threat intelligence. Let's dive into each one of these just a little bit more. First, we'll start with vulnerability response. This helps organizations identify and respond quickly and efficiently to vulnerabilities. With VR, you're able to scan data from your third-party tools and give your teams a single platform for response that can be shared between security and IT to resolve vulnerabilities. These vulnerabilities can include weaknesses in software, operating systems that malware can exploit, and other attacks. VR aids you in tracking, prioritizing, and resolving these vulnerabilities. Security incident response simplifies the process of identifying critical incidents by applying powerful workflow and automation tools that speed up remediation. SIR tracks progress of security incidents from discovery and initial analysis through containment, eradication, and recovery, and then into the final post-incident review, knowledge base article creation, and closure. Next, we have configuration compliance, which prioritizes and remediates misconfigured assets using data gathered from third-party security configuration assessment scans. You can prioritize configuration compliance issues using your CMDB. Configuration compliance tightly integrates with the IT change management process to remediate non-compliant configurations. And lastly, threat intelligence. Threat intelligence helps incident responders find indicators of compromise and hunt for low-lying attacks and threats. The results are reported directly to security incidents for remediation. So when it comes to security, you really want to be sure that you can see everything in your network and have that relevant context in real time. So an example, say you have an expired TLS certificate, those can be vulnerable and they can lead to service outages and data breaches. So to prevent this from happening, it's important to have a full mapping of relevant assets along with their criticality and business context so that we can see these incidents happening in real time. With ITOM and SecOps, we can create tasks either manually or automatically to renew these expiring certificates, create incidents for any expired certificates, and these are all prioritized based upon importance. So pairing these two workflows together can really pinpoint incidents as they're happening and help you see exactly what systems and services they are affecting. The best strategy to drive cyber resilience and promote operational efficiencies is to promote collaboration between IT and security. So with that, let's take a little break from the slides and I'll pass it over to Lauren and Nazer to show us around ITOM and SecOps on the Now platform.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to keep my camera off. I've had some bandwidth issues lately, unfortunately, but let me know when you can go ahead and see my screen.
Yep, we can see it, Lauren.
Perfect. So yeah, as Emily was saying, really the first step to being able to even identify any of the vulnerabilities or the security risks that are happening in your different environment, before you can even do that, it's really important to make sure you have complete visibility to each of your digital estates. And, we have a saying here in the ITOM world that you can only automate what you can see. And I find that very similar to security, kind of that same principle, right? You can only secure what you can see and have visibility to, especially when it comes to what's on your network. And so I'll be kind of representing the ITOM portion here in the demo today, and then I'll pass it over to Nasser, who's our SecOps expert, and he'll kind of show you how this ties together. But what you're looking at in my ServiceNow instance here, I'm going to start with our CI class manager. And you can think of this as basically each of our CI classes that we can see here. You can think of it as a table in your CMDB, in your configuration management database, which is that central source of truth, right? This is where we're going to pool all of that data into, so we can keep a record of the servers in your environment, the applications, all of those different resources that we need first visibility to, so we can start to make sure we're protecting them and identify any vulnerabilities that arise. So this is basically insight to our CMDB tables. Each class you can think of as a table. And I'll go ahead and use our Windows Server table for a good example today. That's pretty standard, something we see a lot of the time that you would need to bring in to a central source, that CMDB in ServiceNow. And Emily briefed us on that discovery tool. So in my environment today, I've pulled all of this data in using ServiceNow Discovery in addition to a few other sources. But the whole goal, right, our priority is that you have some CMDB, preferably in ServiceNow, so you have the central source of truth, so we can capture this data as needed. So in my Windows Server CMDB class, I first want to show you kind of these attributes, because this is how you're going to be able to see exactly what we're telling Discovery to go out and look for at that detailed level. So when it comes to a Windows Server, when we're discovering what Windows Server I have on my different networks in my environment, these are the details that Discovery is going to be looking for out of the box. So ServiceNow has already set up this logic specifically for the Windows Server class. But when I want to actually add attributes, I have the ability to add things and different details and attributes that I want to tell Discovery to look for as well. And so I can't tell you how many times I jump on calls and the security team's on, they're like, oh, we have a whole wish list of data points that we wish we could have brought in so we could start acting on, or, your compliance teams as well. There's so many different use cases. You want to break out of the silo as you start talking about creating that CMDB. And as you're using an automated discovery source, because you have the ability to tell it to go out and find specific data points that might be incredibly useful to your security teams. Things like firewall status, the physical location of a server, the server owner, the team, those things can be incredibly useful when it comes to remediating security incidents. So that's at the attribute level, but as we're bringing this data into our central source, our CMDB, we want to make sure that we can trust this data. We need to bring it in, make sure we can trust it, it's reliable, so that we can start, when we're taking security actions, we know that our data level is accurate and current as things are changing, especially in a virtual resource environment. And so to make sure the data is consistent, we're not dealing with duplicates, that we can trust the data entries in this specific Windows Server example, ServiceNow also has out-of-the-box and logic that you can modify for the identification roles. And so basically what this logic is doing is whenever Discovery or whatever discovery source you're using to populate your CMDB goes out, our identification reconciliation engine, it's basically looking across the CMDB at various relevant tables to make sure we haven't seen this Windows Server before. And that's actually going to be at the attribute level to make sure we're not missing anything, to prevent us from adding duplicates in that we don't need. That can be really confusing when we're trying to orchestrate back and take action on a specific resource. And then we have 2 entries in our CMDB for some reason. So to prevent that in this case, again, just with our specific Windows servers, the logic here is actually first going to check at the serial number table. And at the attribute level, it's looking to see, hey, we found a new Windows server. Is there a match already in our CMDB today that matches the specific serial number we're picking up? Is it the same serial number type? If it passes that check and we don't find anything there, it's also going to check on the hardware table, getting a bit more general, to make sure we don't have another match on the serial number there or something with the same name in that hardware table. And assuming it doesn't find any matches there, it's going to lastly check on that network adapter table to make sure there's no matches for the MAC address and name again that it's pulling in for that new Windows Server record. So assuming it passes all those checks, it's not finding any duplicates anywhere in the CMDB today, it's going to go ahead and create that new Windows Server record because it's basically confirmed that this is new. It was something that got turned on, or maybe it was reactivated in your network, and we have not seen this before in the CMDB, so we can trust that it is a new resource. Now, on the flip side of that, there are going to be incidents, of course, where you're running discovery every day, every couple of minutes, whatever that may look like. And of course, you're detecting the same resources again and again, and things might have changed. You want to make sure you're reflecting those changes in your CMDB. And so on that side of things, that's where the reconciliation logic is going to come into play. Basically, what this is doing, of course, our discovery tool will update those changes, or even if there's no changes made to that resource, it'll still confirm, yep, we discovered that same Windows Server again yesterday. All good to go here. We can still see it, still popping up, all good. But when you have multiple discovery sources active and populating your CMDB, there are use cases where you may want to set one discovery source to have priority to update a specific CI class, a specific attribute of a specific CI class, or you may want to explicitly say, you know what, ServiceNow Discovery can or cannot update this specific area for whatever use cases that may be for you. And so in my case, I've set my logic here to say I have two discovery sources. I have Altiris updating and ServiceNow Discovery updating as well. And I've given Altiris a higher priority to update over ServiceNow when it comes to my specific RAM attribute at my computer level. So you can absolutely do that. Again, it's just helping to feed that integrity when it comes to those specific data points. So you can, again, this is a single source of truth. You want to get that visibility and you want to make sure you can trust this data and keep it as current as possible. So I'm going to dive into the CI list here. You can actually see some of the Windows Server records I brought in. And so I'll click into one of these specific Windows Server CI records and we'll pop up that form. And so this is basically, again, you're kind of peering directly into the CMDB. You can see the different data points going back to that attribute list, all the attributes that I've told Discovery to go out and get for me. We can see some details about this specific Windows Server, the serial number, the firewall status. Again, another example that can be really important for security use cases. But the question I get a lot is, this is great. How much information can we actually bring in with Discovery, and how variable is that, right? So a couple of use cases, since we're kind of telling this better together story with security for today, we can bring in details with ServiceNow Discovery, like the general software that's been installed. What is it? What version? Exactly when was that installed? Can help kind of identify proactively any vulnerabilities and gaps that may arise. The TCP connection, so we can actually see what ports are being listened on here for this specific CI. And the track configuration files as well. So even if we get to a more granular level there, we can actually see those specific changes that may be happening at a detailed level, whether it's approved or unauthorized change can be really important, again, from a security perspective to track as these things are changing in our environment. And as we're talking security use cases, it's also very important to kind of see the different dependencies that are happening in our different records. So I'm going to open up our dependency view, because as Emily was talking to, our discovery tool out of the box, and again, we have our visibility webinar happening, I think in 2 weeks from now. So definitely register for that, because we're going to deep dive into discovery and visibility. But our discovery tool out of the box, as it's running those schedules, is configured to bring in the different dependency relationships and connections that it's seeing from that specific CI. So we can see that same Windows Server that I was just looking at, and I have mine set to 3 levels of connections that I want to see, and I'm telling Discovery to bring in and present to me. So I can see some of these different connections stemming from that Windows Server record. I can see the IP router, I can see some VMware resources that have been provisioned off of it, the track configuration files that we just looked at, the switches. So again, from a security perspective and just from operations in general, it becomes really important to see what's dependent on the specific resources. If we have a vulnerability, kind of what's that wider view and where do we need to prioritize what else might be impacted or infected from that incident. And the last thing I'm going to show before I hand it over to Nacer is going to be our CMDB dashboard. So this is our CMDB Health dashboard. And the question I get a lot at this point is, that's a lot of data. It's great that Discovery and other tools can bring this in, we can centralize it, but how can we make sure that we're actually keeping this data healthy, compliant, make sure that we can trust it? Where can we actually get that check mark to make sure we have everything and that it's reliable? And so at this point, I really like to circle back to our CMDB Health dashboard. And this is out of the box with the ServiceNow CMDB. And so basically what we're doing here is ServiceNow is using our 3 C's to check in with your CMDB and make sure, again, it's healthy, we can trust the data that we're seeing in it, so we can rely on it to layer on things like security, automation, like we talked about. So we have our aggregate score up here at the top, but the 3 C's that we're actually continuously measuring on, we'll start at the right here with this correctness score. And so it's kind of spelled out for you, but what we're looking for there continuously as the CMDB updates, we're looking for any duplicate records. So as we just talked about, really important to make sure we don't have duplicates in there so we can trust the single record that's in. So it's looking for any duplicates that may have been entered either manually and now it's being replicated by Discovery. So we're looking for any records that are the same. Orphans, that's basically any CI records that don't have any of those dependencies that we just looked at. It's kind of a lone wolf. It's not relevant. It's not connecting to anything else in our network. And in some cases, those things might be intentionally like that. It's okay. We're just doing some testing on it or whatever that may be, but it's going to bring it to your attention. You can dive into some of those CI records that it's calling out to you, and you can say, hey, nope, that's good. That's intentional. Stop counting against my health score. But it wants to bring it to your attention so you can review. Staleness, default out of the box is going to be 60 days. So any CI, server, application, whatever, that we've discovered at some point and has been brought into the CMDB, if it's not discovered again at, like I said, the default 60 days, if we're not discovering it again, we're not seeing it pop up within 60 days, it's going to show up as a stale record and bring it to your attention to see what's going on there, or if it's something that you intentionally retired and need to take out of your CMDB. And you can configure that number of days as needed. Compliance, this is where it gets a bit unique to your use cases. Basically, it enables you to configure and script an audit. And so it's going to look at what's currently in your CMDB today, either at that class level, at the amount of data in there, at the attribute value level. And it basically gives you the ability to compare, here's what the should be values are. We should have X many amount of servers. This data attribute should have this value, whatever that should be value is. And you're going to run that scripted audit to compare the should be values, whatever that looks like for you, to the current values in your CMDB. So it's going to go in and compare those values and then give you those results there to what's different, what those gaps might be. And then lastly, we have completeness. This is basically goes back to that attributes list that we talked about. So if there's any attributes that you're like, for example, I don't want Discovery to bring in any Windows servers that doesn't have a value for the MAC address attribute, right? If there's anything you want to set as required at the attribute level, then Discovery is just not going to bring that back into the CMDB because it's incomplete. It'll bring it to your attention here to review. And then same with recommended, it'll go ahead and bring it into your CMDB, but it's going to let you know, it's going to bring it to your attention that a value is missing. That's important. And we need to go back and review either, is that value missing on this resource or what's the disconnect there, so we can make sure we have complete data in our CMDB. So with that, we talked a lot about visibility, getting all the data in the CMDB. So it's just really important to have that visibility at a very detailed levels to your assets, your configuration items, the relationships between those things. And so once you've done that and you're keeping it healthy with something like the CMDB dashboard, making sure you can trust that data, you've really been able to lay that foundation to go layer on security operations capabilities. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nacer to talk through what some of those could look like once you've laid that data foundation.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Lauren. Okay, so here in security operations, one of the values that we are getting from the CMDB is the ability to actually prioritize and look into the specific vulnerabilities that we have in our environment and how we should prioritize working on these vulnerabilities depending on the CIs that are being affected. So over here, I have this dashboard that basically is addressed to someone who is considered like a vulnerability engineer. From here, they can basically look at their entire organization to see the total number of vulnerabilities that they are currently facing, the total number of vulnerable items, the vulnerable items by their risk rating, and the vulnerabilities by their age and risk. Now, without actually understanding the assets that are affected, this information is pretty much useless. All I know is that I have some vulnerabilities in my environment. But if we manage to link a successful CMDB into our environment, then we can do things like, for example, filtering based on the assets. So if I want to take on the example that we had from the CMDB and just focus on Windows servers, now rather than looking at the total number of vulnerable items we have, I'm just looking at the ones that are specific to Windows Server support. On top of that, if I want to dig a little bit deeper, I can move into the services to see out of all of the Windows Server supports, which out of these specific services are the ones that are considered vulnerable. We can even tie that information to the specific service owners in case we want to maybe audit these service owners, or if there's a specific department that is considered a crucial one in our operation, we want to make sure that that specific service owner is up to date with their patching efforts. So we can actually keep track of the number of vulnerabilities that are tied to specific departments and their owners. And just like how we were able to see that in the CMDB, we can see the specific vulnerable CIs. So in my case, out of all of the Windows Server support, how many specific vulnerabilities do we have in Windows Server, Unix Server, computer, etc. We can even see the vulnerable items by their ZI class. So are they Windows Server? Are they an IP router? Are they an IP phone, etc. We can also tie that information to the exception and remediation of all of the specific vulnerabilities that we have. So not only are we keeping track of the total number of vulnerabilities, but we are also keeping track of our remediation and exceptions efforts. Now let's jump ahead and actually look at one of the vulnerability items records in our environment. So first thing that we're going to be seeing, this notification on top tells us the vulnerable item is 40 days past the remediation target date according to the medium high risk rating rule. Now, this allows us to actually create specific rules for specific vulnerabilities based on their risk rating and risk score. So if you see the remediation target rule here, we can preview the record for it. It basically says that as soon as we receive a medium high rating rule of vulnerability, that it should be remediated within the next 30 days. Now, how did we get to that, or how did we associate that specific vulnerability remediation rule to this vulnerability item? Is through the CMDB and through the risk rating and risk score. Now, how did we get to the risk rating and risk score? That takes us to the specific configuration item where this vulnerability lies. So if we looked at the dependency view here, we can see that the vulnerable item is the Windows Server. And there are two basic CIs that can be affected if something goes wrong with this specific Windows Server. In my case, it's the Service Agent Workspace and the Cloud Management. Now, based on the CMDB, we can actually know that these are considered critical assets in our operations. We can even see the specific impacted services. So in my case, it's going to be e-commerce and cloud management, and these are specifically crucial in this specific organization, hence why we have determined the high risk score and high risk rating, and hence how we also associated that with the appropriate remediation target rule. Additionally, we can also leverage information from third-party entries like the CVE or the CWE to actually also feed back into the risk rating and risk score, so we can actually get to know what is that specific vulnerability and whether there is an exploit existing, the exploit attack vector, etc. And finally, when it's time to actually patch the vulnerability, and we can just go ahead and say that it has been closed, we can say that it has been fixed, and the system then is going to indicate whether we want to wait for the confirmation for the next scan or close the vulnerability now and reopen if it's found, because in ServiceNow, we follow basically an ITOM format. So if I said that I want to wait for the confirmation from the next scan, the vulnerability item record will stay open until the vulnerability scanners goes back into my environment and actually makes sure that that vulnerability has been patched successfully. Now, if we happen to have a CMDB in our place, then by the Met server being always connected to our environment to scan back and feedback into the CMDB, another thing that it does is that it also scans the vulnerable item and makes sure that the vulnerability that has been discovered is also patched successfully. So this is just like another benefit of tying in security operations with ITOM. And with that, I'll pass it back to Emily so she can walk us through some of the successful implementation stories that we had with ServiceNow customers.
Thanks, Nazar. Thanks, Lauren. Give me 1 second to get my, okay, there we go. So before we finish up with final Q&A, I want to spend a few minutes going over some of the better together use cases. The first one we have here on the left is AMP, an Australian financial services company. They were struggling to keep pace with new cyber threats, and they were relying on manual systems of email, spreadsheets, phone calls, text messages to respond to these security events. Response times were averaging 12 weeks. It's crazy, weeks. So with the help from one of our partners, KPMG, they were able to implement a configuration management database, that CMDB, a security incident response, a service catalog, and automated service request fulfillment. AMP added business criticality components to core applications, which helped to speed up the security operations deployment. And with these qualifiers in place, when a threat was detected by their FireEye and Nessus scanning systems, the scan data was ingested into ServiceNow, which in turn was able to sift through the noise, prioritize action, and kick off a security incident response. All of this helped AMP to have a 60% reduction in vulnerability response time, going from 12 weeks to 1 week. And they were able to do this and provide them with that one central CMDB for a unified view. The second use case here on the right is USAA. USAA has been providing financial services to members of the US military since 1922 and has really built their reputation on providing responsive and personalized services. Traditionally, USAA has not utilized physical locations on a global scale, so innovation has really been part of their story since the beginning. When USAA decided to migrate from monolithic services to microservices and deploy visibility, automation, and security incident response into their public and private cloud infrastructure, they were able to then map the business context to events and drive automated remediation. The results were impressive. They saw a drop in vulnerabilities by 49%. And now USA has a unified threat management framework that is more effective, more efficient, and more importantly, bridges that gap between IT and security. That's all we have for you today. We hope you've really enjoyed the webinar. So I would like to spend the last little bit of time that we have today and open it up for any questions.
And feel free to pop those in the chat or in the Q&A tab. I think one just popped in there, Emily.
Okay. We also had one coming in that asked about the reconciliation rules section, and they asked, do you literally have to name each attribute that you want to prioritize? What if you want to prioritize all attributes from one discovery source? And the answer is when you create a rule, there's a toggle option to apply to all attributes in the class rather than filter from the choices. The other question, Lauren, I noticed during your demo that that your CI had relationships. Were they manually updated or was it completely by service mapping? Good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. So they weren't manually updated. In my case, those have actually been brought in by discovery. So there's a difference between what discovery brings in from a relationship perspective and then what service mapping does with the ServiceNow tools. So from discovery, it's going to bring in those direct dependency relationships. So it's looking for some of that TCP connections, any traffic that's flowing to get those direct dependencies, runs on, dependent on. Some of those direct connections are brought in with our out-of-the-box discovery tool versus service mapping and ServiceNow. is going to be more of a top-down approach. So it's actually looking for the entire service based on if it's in the cloud tags, that traffic data, machine learning is running over the process data to see those connections. So service mapping is much more top-down, looking for everything supporting a service versus the relationships that you saw today are directly brought in by discovery, looking for those direct connections automatically. But great question. Thank you.
Any other questions before we wrap up?
Yeah, and if any of this is interesting to you all, or you want to kind of see this more in depth for your environment, definitely reach out to any of us or your ServiceNow rep to further the conversation.
All right, well, I can go ahead and wrap things up unless a question pops in there. Again, as Lauren mentioned, please reach out to us if you do have any questions. I'll provide my contact information after this and can get you connected with the right person. Thank you all again for taking the time to sit in and participate with our 4th session in the ITOM Talk series. I hope the Better Together story between ITOM and SecOps was relevant to you. Please be on the lookout for that follow-up email coming from myself. It gets caught in spam sometimes, so please advise, check that spam folder. If you're having issues, please reach out to myself. The email will contain a link to visit the post-event landing page. This page houses all recordings and slide decks from the completed sessions in the entire series. It will also house the registration link for the entire series as well. So we have 3 sessions remaining. You can go on there and register for those last 3 sessions. We also posted that link in the chat as well. The last thing the email will contain is that Uber Eats redemption gift code. If you have any complications with that, please feel free to ping me. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And I'll go ahead and answer any last minute questions here. See a few in the chat.
Yeah, one came in about the Discovering ITOM Visibility session in the future. Can you provide the link to sign up? Yeah, John, I think it was up earlier in the chat, but we can send it again.
There you go. I just popped it in there for everybody. Thanks everybody for joining. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Cheers.
Have a good day. Bye, everyone.
Take care.